Welcome in, everyone. You're listening to Bull Central. We've just wrapped up the week of the draft combine. NBA Finals are around the corner, then the draft, free agency, all that good stuff. And I thought it'd be a great time to bring back one of the biggest historians of the game, a guy who has been covering the NBA and the Bulls for over 4 decades now, author of the bestseller, The Jordan Rules, longtime writer for the Chicago Tribune, and you know him for all of his great work covering the team over at Bulls.com. It's my pleasure to welcome back to the show Sam Smith of Bulls.com. Sam, it's great to see you again and appreciate you making the time.
Sure. Good to talk to you.
And now I'm sure most of you are already, but be sure to check out all of Sam's work at Bulls.com. Also, Sam's got a new book coming out that is available by pre-order. I've already ordered a copy myself. It's co-authored by him and Phil Jackson, titled Master
Oh,
of the
yeah, I got
Game.
some. I can show you. They
What's
sent me,
that?
they sent me,
Okay, okay.
publisher sent me a proof. I
There
got
we
this,
go.
what it looks like.
I was gonna ask, when's the release date again?
Yeah, it's not till publishing takes a while. Um, I think it's November, beginning of November.
Okay.
But we're done. I mean, that's actually an uncorrected proof. So I'm still finishing up the editing, but that's about done. But yeah, I think it'll be like a really fun book. Not just because of Phil, but more it's a conversation. I think it's unique, kind of. It's not it is a history kind of thing, but it's
Yeah.
more like the class. It's sort of the concept I had with the Jordan rules, which
Right.
became a lot bigger than it was. It was the old cliched fly on the wall. The Jordan rules was supposed to be just a diary of a team going through a season, and
Right.
what happened to be Jordan, the Bulls won, all this other stuff happened that was
Right.
unexpected. And this is the same thing. Come and sit and listen to Phil Jackson and I talk about the history of the game. So anyway, it's kind of a fun little kind of nuggets, 2 or 3 pages on each guy.
Well, and that's why I'm intrigued by it because we don't get to hear from Phil Jackson all that often, you know. So I'm definitely looking forward to reading it. I'll leave a link to of the book in the description for anybody who's interested. And Sam, I hope maybe I can get a signed copy whenever I see you next, since I
Yeah,
got you a
it's
signed
easy to
copy of
get
Jordan
me.
Rules.
It's easy to get me, not Phil. It's hard to get
I was
Phil.
hoping you'd be able to give me Phil too, but I know that's
Hard for me to get Phil.
Now, Sam, let's talk about the Bulls, a team that you've been talking about for years. I feel a lot of people don't view it this way. I'm probably in the minority in this opinion, but this is kind of a critical offseason for the Bulls and how it shapes their future. In my view, they really need to get this offseason right to get them on the right path. Otherwise, we're going to be staring at more of the same thing that we've seen the past few seasons. They didn't get the number one pick, so they'll be drafting 12th. They've got guys up for extensions that they're going to need to figure out, which we'll talk about. But I'm curious, in your view, just based on what you know of this front office, based on what Arturo said at his end of season press conference, what are your expectations for how things will transpire this offseason? And then we can get into some of the specifics as it relates to the draft, potential trades, free agency, and stuff like that.
Overall, I'm probably a little discouraged. Probably like most fans, you were hoping for at least sneak into the top four,
Yeah.
and they really, Dallas gets 1.8%, and basically it came down to it wasn't technically a coin flip, but the tiebreaker.
Right.
That they lose the tiebreaker. The irony was a couple of years ago they had the same situation with Sacramento.
Yeah.
They won that tiebreaker, and Sacramento behind them ended up jumping up to two.
Yeah.
So like I mentioned the other day, it's sort of a bad luck Bulls. So it on one level it limits them and it basically puts them in a similar situation as they've been, sort of stuck in the middle.
Yeah.
But I think there are two things. I think one is I think they're going to handle the draft the way they did last year. Uh, not take the best player available, but take the best player that falls to them. Uh, they haven't been very good when they've decided, when they target a player like
Yeah.
Patrick Williams, Dalen Terry, but they have good when guys have slipped through. Io DeSumo, um, and last year, Modest Bazelis, they had targeted, or at that time, the way these mock drafts and these lists come, everybody kind of has the same list. And so I think Ron Holland was their pick. And then Modest, who everybody thought's going 5, 6, 7 at
Yeah.
most, is there at 11. And I think I see this draft like that draft in a sense that there's
Yeah.
three, maybe four players sort of off the top. And then the next six, seven, eight are eye of the beholder. I think, one team will see a guy at five that another team will see at 15. I don't think it's that strong. It was sold at this great draft. I think they'll be good. It'll be the same as usual. Some good players somewhere. Maybe eight will be good, and 12 will be good, and 18 will be good. So you won't know. So I think they're going to sit there and be in the spot and say, whoever falls to us that we had ranked higher than others, we'll take. And so, but as a result, it's hard to judge. The needs obviously are size, toughness, front court. But if a top guard who can shoot falls to, I think they would take him. And that would give him potential flexibility. You say, well, not another guard. We don't need another guard. Well, you can trade guards. You can do the things you can do. The other thing is what Arturis said in that end season conference. You can kind of dig out some nuggets from that. But one was the point he made about Giddey. They were obviously high on Giddey.
Yeah.
It's pretty obvious that they'll give him an extension, and he'll be a primary piece for them going forward. But what he said is what I took from it was players like Giddey in the sense of draft picks, guys who are highly sought of, who teams have given up on, kind of thing,
Hmm.
and who we still like. And so a guy who fits that kind of profile is Kuminga with Golden State.
Right.
Pretty sure. I mean, every indication based on Steve Kerr's usage of him and everything is they're going to do a sign and trade.
Yeah.
And so, could you get involved in that? Do you wanna? I'm assuming they do. Because he would be the athletic wing that Patrick Williams was supposed to be, and is
Right.
obviously not. And they've kind of obviously, lost faith in Patrick, but moved him to the bench and probably try to move him. I don't know. I doubt they'll be able to. I don't expect they'll be able to with I think 4 years left on his contract. But
Right.
he's still a solid, reserve guy coming in. He averages 10 points. He can play a comparable defense. I mean, his part of his problem was sort of similar to the problem that Zach LaVine had with the Bulls. They paid him $45 million, so then they expected him to be LeBron.
Right.
He's not. And the same thing with Patrick. They say, well, we drafted him four, so he has to be a star. Well, he's not. He's a star, but he could, he'd be a good serviceable backup. That's okay. You need that. You see teams in the playoffs now, bench players, Strawther, come in, guys that, have one game, a series that helps them. So, I don't think it's a negative, but one thing, and Kuminga is a restricted free agent. And again, I don't know if that's a guy they like, but I'm assuming that fits. I'm just saying that fits a profile of what he's
Yeah, for sure.
identified, and it
Yeah.
also would fit a need, of an athletic wing 6'7" to go with Buzelis 6'10". And from what I had heard at the deadline, Golden State was interested in uh, uh,
Vucevic.
Vucevic and Levine,
Hmm.
a deal that included both. The Bulls didn't want to do it because they wanted to sure to get that pick back in the
I see.
Levine deal. But if the Warriors are still interested in Vucevic, then I think there's a deal to be made. It only has 1 year left, makes 20, so it sort of could fit in a sign and trade, throw in one player. They'd probably want Kobe White, maybe hurt. You could do Herter, something, so there seems like a possibility there to do something that would, seemingly upgrade their talent.
Do you foresee a scenario where the Bulls, just going back to the draft real quick, where they would potentially trade up? There's been reports that the Sixers are maybe looking to trade their pick at number three. Um, Potentially other teams like the Rockets. Any thing that you're hearing on your end as far as the Bulls potentially looking to trade up in the draft?
You always look at everything, and the question is, well, what would you want? Yeah,
Right.
so what potentially would fit the Bulls would be that big guy from Rutgers. Yeah, yeah, I would think. The assumption is Harper would, Harper seems to be a uh, favored number two guy, but he wouldn't necessarily fit the Bulls in the sense that if you're investing in Giddy, Harper is a on ball control kind of player. So
Right.
I don't think they'd be interested in him. So presumably they'd be interested in the big guy from Rutgers, who be a nice fit.
Ace
But then
Bailey.
you teams want a lot when you trade up. And
Yeah.
so for the Sixers, they say, well, they want a ready-made player now that's going to help them. So that would be like Kobe White. I
Yeah.
don't see anybody else on the roster who would make sense. So that wouldn't be worth it to trade up. I wouldn't want to trade up 5 spots and give up Kobe White. So yeah, I think they would look into stuff like that. And when they made that Levine trade, they tried to move both Herter and Zach Collins, right? That day, and they
Yeah.
couldn't.
Right.
Both of them ended up, playing pretty well or helping, and each have 1 year left. But I still think, both would be available, and so even though it doesn't seem like they'll do a lot, I think there's the possibility because I think they're going to put up a lot of players in auction. I mean, look, they missed the playoffs again. It's not like they got a roster full of untouchables.
Right.
Zealous and Giddy probably the only ones.
Yeah.
Uh, so I think they'll explore a lot of things. Right now, it would be just guessing anything. It moving up doesn't make much sense to me if you got to give up a lot. Like
Yeah.
I might move up if I really wanted a player and Portland wanted his pick back and you know something like that, and maybe some sort of exchange of players there. Portland's got extra wing players maybe they don't need. I don't, but they haven't done that kind of stuff. I don't expect them to do that stuff, but I could see involved in, like I said, sign and trades. I think they'll look to be involved in trade just because, like I said, they have maybe two untouchables on their roster.
Yeah. If assuming the Bulls stay at number 12, are there any players? I know we talked offline right before we started. You didn't attend the combine, but I'm sure you've been looking at some of the players. Are there any guys that intrigue you at number 12 that you've seen thus far?
Yeah, I'd have to look at the list now. I'm not a college. I don't watch these guys. Although I've
Yeah.
already done a mock draft, and so through the Bulls pick. Um, and I forget which guy. If you showed me, and I forget who these guys are.
Yeah.
There's a couple of athletic wings.
Yeah. So
Uh,
for you, it's
if you
more.
mentioned them,
Yeah.
these guys don't play at the combine. We were telling you, I went to the lottery. I don't go to the combine. It's almost a personal issue I have with what the league does. They don't. Uh, uh,
Yeah. Make the
Cooper
players play.
Flag Cooper Flag should be playing. I want to see him play against other top players.
Yeah.
I don't understand why the NBA doesn't force these players to play. These are job interviews for these players.
Yeah.
And I think that's why the draft is so bad. And I think that's why teams make so many mistakes in the draft because they never can see these guys play after their college. And then, some of them play in the G League or Ignite or whatever those things are. And
Right.
that's like schoolyard ball is barely organized. And the combine has legitimate coaches asking them to do things. To me, that's a terrible mistake the NBA made. They're just completely given up, and it makes the combine a joke to me. I think it's a laughable exercise, and I personally boycott it because I think the NBA has sold out. What other business in the world lets the potential employees decide what they're going to do in job interviews? Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm not going to talk to anybody because I'm just good. I'm just so good that your company needs me. You know what?
Right.
The NBA will be great without Cooper Flag for the next 50 years. If Cooper Flag doesn't play 1 minute in the NBA ratings will go up. They'll make a ton of money. Every franchise will be worth double in 10 years what it is now, and nobody will remember Cooper Flag. So this is a joke. So that's why I don't go to this thing. It's a joke.
So
Make the guys play who are like, going to Europe. Who cares? Who cares if those guys are playing in games?
it's kind of interesting when you're talking about, the draft and why sometimes because players don't play in the combine and the combine is, somewhat limited in terms of what you can learn from a given prospect, it makes the draft a bit of a crapshoot. I've always said the draft is a crapshoot in terms of, what you're going to get
Yeah.
because you never know what you're going to get until they actually come onto the NBA floor. One of the biggest debates a divisive debate among Bulls fans this year, even going into this upcoming season, is whether the Bulls should be taking a step back, tanking, if you will, for a better shot at landing a star level talent, or focusing on development and still trying to win. I'm curious from your perspective where you sort of fall on this spectrum, and do you think the Bulls did the right thing this year to try and make the playoffs despite coming up short?
Yeah, I'm always for competing. I understand what it is, but we saw from 2017 when they traded Jimmy, they threw games for 4 years, and I know
Right.
they can't say it. You're not supposed to. You go to jail, whatever. But they weren't trying
They
to
were.
win. They were trying to lose, and it didn't work any year. Could have
Yeah,
worked.
it didn't. They got the
I get
seventh
it.
pick every year.
I get it. You got to get lucky, and it could work. Now you don't expect to get so lucky. We're picking like Dallas did this year or where they were. But if you look at it, the teams that were trying to, I mean, really, this lottery maybe sent the best message to not do this because Washington, again, like the last 2 years, Detroit,
Yeah.
what'd they go for 1 to 5?
Yep.
Like
Yep.
two or three years in a
And that
row.
was the second year in a row that that happened. They
Right.
went from 1 to 5.
So the teams that were the most embarrassing this year, that were uncompetitive, that spent 6 months that you didn't even want to look at them, were
Yeah.
Utah, Washington, Charlotte, and all of them dropped.
Yeah.
I know it's mathematics, and yeah, and so anyway, I value the regular season. So even though I know uh, statistically or analytically it's the right thing to get better odds, I don't like giving up the regular season.
Yeah.
Yeah, I prefer to hope that management is smarter because I think a smart management, look, if you get lucky, you get LeBron, you get Wembanyama, Flag,
Yeah.
that sets up your franchise for the next 10 years. I get it. But only one team gets that.
It,
Everybody else
yeah.
doesn't. So I'd rather rely on going through the season, playing seriously. You're not in Chicago. I am. The fans were excited about in the home games.
Yeah.
The arena was kind of electric most of the time.
Yeah.
I think, even though I think a lot of the fan base says, yeah, tank. Well, you know what? They're not going to the games. They're doing other stuff, going to movies and stuff.
Right.
All the others of us, including the Bull, especially the Bulls management and players, that has to be at all the games.
Yeah.
They don't want to be involved with a losing situation like that. So
Yeah.
anyway, that's a long answer for saying I'm anti-tanking.
So I am too. I mean, I think, there are also, levels to this, right? And given the circumstances, I think had I said this a couple years ago, where the Bulls were kind of in no man's land, not that they're still not in no man's land, but it was different when they had a much older roster. Now you have some of these younger guys that are showing some promise. I think that there's value in developing those players and putting them in winning situations rather than hoping for a 14% chance. That's the best chance you're going to get at getting a number one pick, even if you have the worst record. That's sort of my perspective. Um,
I
I did
prefer
want to
actually
good.
the Miami, Philly models, trying to win all the time right away because sometimes you can.
Right.
Sometimes it works out. There's always players that come available. I don't think the Bulls are going to get Giannis, but players come available. Teams, there's all the trades in the NBA are basically the same. It's the guy
Mhm.
I hate, the guy you hate. But I don't know how bad he is yet. You hate him. We don't
Right.
hate him yet. All we know is we hate our guy.
Yeah.
So, a lot of times you can take advantage if you're a good management, if you're smart, if you have a plan, if you have a theory about how you play. I always go back to the Phoenix model. I love the Phoenix model under D'Antoni because I knew those scouts then, and they used to look at the draft and they would say, "This guy, he's way better than the guy we're going to pick." But the guy we're going to pick is the guy who fits the way Mike wants to play. He's not going to, he's going to average 11 points. This other guy might average 22,
Right.
but because he's more talented. But this guy's going to fit Mike, and so that's what I'd rather see. A coach and the
Yeah.
GM is on the same page, building in the same way toward the style of, and the Bulls haven't had that a lot, and this season sort of it wasn't that way a couple of years ago. So I think maybe they're getting on that same page now.
So you mentioned Giannis. We gotta talk about that really quick. Biggest fantasy that exists right now for Bulls fans. That small glimmer of hope that maybe they
Right,
can get him in
Tesho.
the offseason. Do you
There's 28 teams he could be traded to. The one team he cannot be traded to,
is the
will
Bulls?
not be traded to, is the Bulls. I guarantee you that.
But
If,
but
if,
but
if
why
you look
why why the
all
Bulls and any of the 28 other teams?
It's because of Chicago and Milwaukee. If you don't live in this area, on the west coast of Lake Michigan, you don't get it. You just got to look at the Cubs. They recruited this manager who is like this most popular guy in Milwaukee. He's a
Yeah.
Wisconsin native. Council, I think his name is. I don't pay much attention to that stuff. Uh, and he was beloved. Now, when the Cubs go back and play games in Milwaukee, he's booed mercilessly. They hate him. I got a lot of friends up there, even some friends who were partners with the ball club in ownership. They hate him now. They don't want to. They don't want to mention his name. There's
But
no way. And Milwaukee hates the fact that Chicago, people are wealthier, have a lot more expendable income. Come up to those games all the time and buy those
yeah,
tickets. And
right.
in the arena, in the Bucks arena during Bulls games, it's as loud for the Bulls as it is for the Bucks.
Yeah.
So even if the Bulls had stuff to trade, they don't. But even if they did, like they say they had LeBron and Durant, Milwaukee still wouldn't do it because
Yeah.
they're not dealing with Giannis coming back in their building in a Bulls uniform. Never happened.
So you would say that like the Hornets, for example, would have a better chance at trading for Giannis than the Bulls?
Absolutely, 100%.
Okay. Because I mean, I
First
don't
of
think,
all,
yeah,
remember this: Giannis has no say in it. He's under
of
contract.
course, yeah,
Damian Lillard, there's like, uh, there's maybe 25 teams he'd rather be in Milwaukee. I guarantee you that. That's the one place he didn't want to be.
yeah,
He was beloved in Portland. He thought he was going to Miami. He wakes up every day in the winter. It's cold, it's dark, it's miserable. You can't go anywhere. It's an awful place in the winter. And and he's stuck there by himself. You know he hates it. But Portland is like, hey, you want to be traded? You're
yeah,
under contract. We're going to make the best deal for us. So Milwaukee has a history with Kareem in that trade. One
yeah,
is I don't think Giannis is going to be traded because I think Milwaukee is still hurt from that trade of Kareem. But two, they're going to trade him where they want to trade him. They're not going to.
yeah.
They're not going to trade him where he wants to go.
Sure,
So,
sure.
oh yeah, the other thing they got going for them is Giannis is not James Harden.
Yeah,
He's
yeah.
not going to
Or
make
like
a
Ben
mockery.
Simmons or anything like
Right.
that. Yeah,
He's not going to make a mockery of the
sure.
franchise. He's a classy, professional person, good citizen. He's not going to quit playing like Harden did, try to embarrass the organization with trade demands. And so I don't think they'll feel pressure. Now, if they get a great offer, there's a couple of teams that can give them great offers with a lot of picks. Houston, maybe San Antonio,
Yeah,
a lot of
the Thunder even.
yeah, some of these teams that accumulated a lot of draft picks and have young players. The Bulls don't have either of that. You
Well,
know,
they have. I mean, they have all their picks at their disposal. I agree. It's not to the level of what,
no, 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 they don't.
Houston
They got
Thunder.
their picks. These other teams got really good picks. They got
Yeah,
everybody's pick. Why
yeah,
do why do I want build the Bulls picks if they got Giannis? They're gonna make the playoffs.
yeah.
Those are crap picks. I don't want those
Well,
picks.
because I agree. I don't think the Bulls are going to get Giannis. I think that's a
No,
fantasy
they're
world.
not gonna. It's
I
not I
just
don't think they're gonna get him. They're not, he's not coming to
I just
Chicago.
in
He
my
will
view
never
the
be in
Bull
Chicago other than shopping on Michigan Avenue.
it just in my view I would think that the Bulls would have slightly better odds at landing Giannis than say teams like the Hornets or the
No,
Jazz.
not at all.
Yeah.
Not so. Look, all right. So I'll play your game. You're going to make it. So Milwaukee said, "Well, we got to recoup." All right, so we'll take. You got to give us Bozelis, Giddy, and Kobe White, and two
Yeah.
first. Mikal Bridges got five first.
Yeah,
You know,
which is insane. Yeah.
and so Giannis, he's thinking, "All right, so I go down to Chicago. I got a better chance of winning in Chicago with Kevin Herter and Zach Collins
No,
and
no.
Dalen Terry compared to staying in Milwaukee."
Yeah. And that's what I'm
So,
saying. I think the
like,
biggest
what's the
thing,
deal?
yeah, the biggest reason Giannis won't go to Chicago is because he needs to go to a winning situation. I mean, at this point in his career, he wants to win now, and the Bulls just aren't that.
Yeah. Also,
Um,
Milwaukee's not a farm team of the Bulls or anybody else.
yeah,
It's not they're not there to supply Giannis to somebody so they can have succeed. I know fans look at it that way. Yeah, let's get
yeah,
Giannis. Yeah. So so on. Well, so I'm a fan of the Milwaukee Bucks say, and they say, all right, we'll make a trade with Chicago. Let's see if we can get the best players on a team that lost in the play-in. Yeah, I'm really excited about that. What
So
what are you, yeah, what are you telling me?
So okay, so forget Giannis for a second. What about other big names that could become available on the
No,
market this summer? Guys like Zion, maybe John Morant, Demontis Sabonis, maybe even Trey Young. I'm actually not a fan of the Bulls acquiring any of these guys, by the way, just for the record, just because I think their
right.
contracts are going to be too restrictive in today's CBA environment. But have you heard anything about any of those guys being on the move in the Bulls front office, exploring options there?
Front offices explore everything, and rumors come up. They're not going to do anything like that. What Arturis said was pretty clear that postseason thing.
Yeah,
They're not going to take on big contracts. They're going to look to, and I agree with that. I would do that too. Uh, there's not an urgency right now. The other thing is the East is going to be, Boston could take a big, with Tatum hurt,
right,
with their payroll, they could fall back. Okay, Philly moves up. Yeah, Cleveland's still going to be good. New York's still going to be good. So, you're not going to be top four, but you'll have a shot maybe to get to six, maybe, and I think that's where the Bulls are looking now. I think if they were honest with you, they would say coming into next season, if we have a chance to play for sixth, uh, we'd be thrilled because
yeah,
the summer of 2026, we'll have a lot of cap room if we don't do anything stupid.
right.
And stupid would be trading for Zion Williamson, who doesn't play. I would never trade for him. I wouldn't trade Dalen Terry for him because I think he's an anchor on your franchise.
Yeah, yeah,
I think players like that, well, not only cost you jobs, which they did, but players like that weigh down your franchise for years because you're expecting them to be a star. And while they'll be a star in the 22 games they play, most of the time they don't play. And
right,
we
right,
knew from day one uh, with Zion. That was one of the years the Bulls were tanking, that Zion was one and Ja was two.
yep,
And I remember
yep,
the Bulls management then saying, we hope we get, if we get one, we're going to have to take Zion. Everybody knows they have to take Zion one because you
right,
can't pass the big name. But we don't think his body's going to be a hold up in the NBA with the torque that
mm,
he puts on,
right, right,
and that's proven out. They were right about that, but so was a lot of other teams. Now it turned out, Morant's, and so he's a problem too, and his body's not going to
right,
hold out either. So you
right.
can't take a risk on him because he doesn't play. And
Yeah,
that's the big thing too with these money guys. Yeah, and that's why I thought Zach was treated badly because Zach did play. Yeah,
yeah,
maybe he didn't measure up in talent. He's darn good. And I'll tell you what, if he were with Houston or Detroit, they'd still be playing now because that's all
yeah,
they're missing. And
for
that's
sure.
exactly where he needs to be the third player on a good team with defense, like he was in Golden. Actually, they would need, they're better off with Jimmy, but, because of defense. But, a team
Right.
like Houston that's got all these defenders. Oklahoma City is a great example. That's the one thing Presti screwed up. He didn't go get a second player who can create his own shot.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
And if they lose, that's why they're going to lose, because they don't have a second player create his own shot as good as that defense is. But Zach can do. Zach said, so he put Zach in the right spot. The Bulls didn't. They said, oh, you got to be the number one guy, and he wasn't that.
Right.
So I don't know where I was going on that.
No, no, it's so good.
Oh yeah, that's
It's
what I'm saying.
yeah,
Zion, Ja, you can't take those players.
yeah,
You can't spend that kind of money on guys who don't play,
yeah,
and that destroys your franchise. So I think the Bulls are, going in the right direction now. They're building incrementally with young players who seem to, have an ability to stay on the court, play, have a style of play, and it's just going to be slower.
yeah.
I don't see, unlike what you said, I don't see this summer as that crucial. I think
Okay.
I think this is an incremental summer.
So let's because one of the biggest things from this summer is Josh Giddey. Let's talk about him for a second. He had a slow start to the year, but obviously ended really nicely and did impact winning. Now, some might say that's because they faced off against weaker teams. Teams were resting players, but he had a good year, and he's only 22. Bulls obviously pursued him heavily, like we talked about in that trade for Alex Caruso. Going to be a restricted free agent. Well, I think the Bulls will absolutely be bringing him back on a deal. The question is how much, and is there a scenario where a team offers Giddy maybe more than the Bulls are willing to match? I think the figure I heard that Giddy was looking for was 5 years, 150 million. What are your thoughts as far as like how much they should be focusing on Giddy in terms of a contract?
Well, let me first say, I believe his stats are way inflated.
Okay.
He was not that kind of player for what exactly you said. The last 20 games of the season, they played a lot of teams with losing records, a lot of teams that were trying to lose, sadly, but it was close to the end of the season in the
Yeah.
lottery, and got caught up in a lot of high scoring games as a result.
Yeah.
And also, yeah, I'm not saying he behaved illegally, but I thought he chased a lot of rebounds that were, missed free throws kind of things.
Mm,
I thought he held the ball a lot of times. That so when he gave it up, the guy had to shoot. He didn't have a chance to pass it. So if he made the
mm.
shot, he got an assist. If he didn't, so what? So
Right.
you can artificially inflate some stats. That said, he still had good stats. To me, I'm just saying this. He's not a triple. Don't pay him as a triple double player. That's
Yeah.
not what he is. But he can get 17, 8, and 6, something like that. And that's pretty darn good. Now that said, nobody can pay him. Uh, the only team with money, I think, is the Nets.
Yeah.
You know, they're in the market for big games. They're not spending all that free agent money on Josh Giddey.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't worry if I'm the Bulls. The mistake the Bulls have made previously is paying some of these restricted free agents when you got leverage. The
Yeah.
NBA has provided you leverage. They gave the ownership this deal. It's not great for the players, but it's great for the ownership. So if they give you leverage, take it.
Yeah.
I never understood why they don't, why so many of these players they didn't let go in the market. Let the market set their value and then match it. I'm fine with that.
Well, so that's what I was going to ask. I mean, do you think the Bulls maybe learned their lesson from what happened with Patrick Williams, right? They obviously paid him before he hit restricted free
Right.
agency. They didn't let the market dictate his worth. Do you think that they'll approach it this way now with Josh Giddey and letting the
I think they
market dictate
should.
his value?
I think they should, but they have a perfect record of never listening to my advice. So I don't know what they'll do, but
Well,
they should. That's the smart thing. Also because I don't think anybody has money to make a big offer.
yeah.
And so I think he won't get any offer, actually. He won't get a substantial offer. Maybe, I don't know, Utah's got money. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe he gets an offer and the Bulls work out something. I think they'll give him a substantial offer. I don't know. I've been labor my entire life. I'm for the players. I hope they get as much as they can. And I'm never one to say, oh, like Zach, you got 45 million. Good for him. That's on management to figure out how to balance your budget.
Yeah.
Players should try to get as much as he can. Just
Yeah.
says you or I, any job we didn't, I never went into a job and say, well, to the betterment of the organization, why don't you pay me half of what I think I
Right.
deserve? You take what you can get. And so it's up to Bulls to make a fair offer that balances what they want to go in the future. I don't see any scenario where they won't make a deal with him.
Yeah. I was just going to ask that. Do you think that there's any sort of scenario where Josh Giddey does not come back?
No, I really don't.
Yeah.
Because they've been big on when they make a trade or when they take uh, do something like they made the Caruso trade. So I think they would, like to feel like, and I think the community felt, even though Caruso has a chance to win a title, I think the community felt that, the Bulls won that deal because of
Yeah.
his production at the end of the season. So I think they want to ride that, and also they need a point guard. I don't think Alonzo's a long-term answer.
Right.
Io is you're not sure is he going to be able to start the season after shoulder surgery or how
Right.
effective he'll be in the early part. So he's really your only. I think they like Trey Jones, but he's an unrestricted free agent. He could get it now. A guy like that can get an offer.
Yeah.
That you might not want to match because it's build up and because I think like I said, I think the whole. Uh, plan is to work toward 2026 summer. We will, you're really in position. If Vucevic if you can't trade him, which I think they actually will trade him, but if you can't, he comes off the books. Collins comes off the books. Kobe White now, that's a big issue. You want to pay him, then you're going to trade him. But they'll be one of the teams with the most potentially the most cap room. That also
Yeah.
depends on if they do this, something with Kaminga, sign and trade. Now
Yeah.
that's what I'm saying. So I think there's a lot of balls in the air now. So I think it's hard to read what they'll do.
Now, I'll get you out of here on this because you mentioned Kobe. I did want to bring that up real quick. I think the other big question going into this offseason is what are they going to do with Kobe White? He's going to be
Right.
going into the final year of his deal, extension eligible. Otherwise, he becomes a free agent in 2026. What are you hearing internally about how the Bulls are sort of approaching Kobe's contract, whether or not there's a possibility they may even trade him before the start of the season?
Yeah, I think there's some sentiment, more in the community about, we got enough guards. I would want to keep Kobe White.
Yeah.
To me, you traded all your scoring. You got rid of Zach, you got rid of DeMar.
Right.
Uh, I think, that they want to move on from Vucevic for defensive purposes and
Yeah.
whatever. So if you do that, and while like I said, I like Giddey's production. I don't see him as a scorer. I think if you defend him, if you play him physically, if he doesn't have Kobe White out on the wing with him,
Yeah. True.
people say, well, they're not a great match as, defensively as a tandem as a guard. But if he doesn't have the defense looking at Kobe White, I think it becomes really hard for Giddey because he's not a very physical player, and I think if you pick him up high, you're going to give him trouble. He's not a great shooter if he's guarded. So I really think he needs White, and I think the Bulls need White. And here's a guy who they really developed, who's gotten
Yeah.
better under them, has gotten a lot better, who's really on the verge of being an all-star. I hear a lot of this about, yeah, we need to move on from White and get a size. I understand that, get a big guy, but I would want to keep him. And then,
Okay.
see what happens. See what happens in free agency after next season. But he would be a guy I would want to keep on my team.
I know I said I would get you out of here on that last question, but Sam, do you think in
All
your
right.
lifetime you'll see a Bulls championship again?
Well, you should answer that question on your lifetime. Mine doesn't have that much to go. So
But but that's what I mean.
my
Like, what do you think?
lifetime,
Could they
no,
maybe win in the next,
no,
decade or so?
my lifetime, no. But yours possibly. I would say
Okay.
mine would be no, uh, because I would like not to be that close to the end, but that's how it's.
Ah, you
So,
got plenty of years left. The Bulls will win. The Bulls will win a title in your
but that's
lifetime.
that's not the point. If you look at the playoffs now, you say, who could Minnesota win a title or Oklahoma City?
Yeah.
I think it's going to be wide open for a while. And so
Yeah.
I think teams are going to pass around, but it's going to, titles come down when it's like this. There's a lot of parity in the NBA now.
Right. Right.
And I think there's going to be for several years to come,
Yeah.
in part because teams have kind of abandoned this superstar combination with the big three model not working and the new salary cap rules with the
Right.
second apron. And you see Boston, even if Tatum hadn't gotten hurt, the belief was with new ownership, the whole part of new ownership is whether they were going to try to break up the team anyway,
Yeah. Because they won't
just
be able to afford
financial
all of them.
reasons, right?
Yeah.
And maybe Golden State, similarly because they've been paying all this luxury tax. So I think we're entering a good era in a sense for teams like the Bulls that I think it's kind of wide open. And I think one of the Bulls models, in a sense, is a team that could win the title, Indiana Pacers. I mean, if you look at the way the Pacers have played the last several years,
Yeah.
that's kind of the way the Bulls have been trying to play. Now they don't have the physical players Indiana has yet,
Right.
but you could get a couple of those players. So maybe 2 and 3, 4 years, yeah, they could be in that position and have a chance. And I think that's really what they're looking for. I think that teams say, "Oh, we're here to win it." You shouldn't say that. Don't say we're here to win a title. What you should say is we want to get in position to be in the Final Four, and if we
Yeah.
can do that then we're good enough to win a title. It doesn't mean we're going to win a title. Usually
Yeah.
you win a title because you have a transcendent, Michael Jordan, LeBron
Right.
James, Kobe Bryant. That's how you win titles. But
Yeah.
sometimes you sneak through, you get Dirk and a bunch of guys, and you can win a title. You
Yeah.
get Rasheed Wallace and Ben Wallace and a bunch of guys, and you win a title. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, you can. And I think that is, the Bulls won't say it, I might gather, but I think that's their goal.
Yeah.
Let's put as let's put several good players together. Develop a style of play. Sort of like Indiana did. The transition, fast pace. All the things you hear opponents now talking about, like Cleveland was talking about Indiana in losing that last game. And it sounded like they were talking about the Bulls. Yeah, we tired them out in the fourth quarter. We ran, we pushed. The
Right.
pace was high. So I think you can see they finally got a roster close to the way the coach wants to play. They
Yeah.
didn't have it the last couple of years with the Rosen and Levine and Vucevic. It was half court. It was slower.
It was slower.
And
Yeah,
so
for sure.
moving on from DeRozan and moving on, from Levine, you sort of cleared out that where you can, play the way Billy wants to play, push the ball, speed, keep running. And now you've got to, if you can add to that with what they're missing, and you see it mostly in these playoff games, they're missing physicality and
Yeah,
toughness. They're
for
not
sure.
a tough team at all. They get pushed around, and you see
Yeah.
that's what Miami did to them and winning all these play-in games. So if they can add a couple of players like that, to complement the couple of players that they have, Giddy, Buzelis, and play a style and stick to it. Yeah,
Yeah.
then they could start to get in the conversation. And I think
Yeah.
that's what they're trying to do. So, um, without talking about my lifespan, I think they have a chance in the next couple of years to get in the conversation. And
Yeah.
so that would be something.
I think the Bulls need another Joakim Noah. That's the type of player they should be looking at right now.
Unfortunately or fortunately, a lot of it comes down to luck.
Yep, it does.
So Dallas got lucky when the Bulls
Yep.
didn't. If they'd have
Yep.
gotten, you can't say if only, but if they'd have gotten Flag, it would have set them up for the next decade. And
Yeah,
then
of course. Yeah.
and they didn't get it by one ping pong ball. I
Yeah.
mean, so what does good or bad management have to do with that?
Yeah.
So anyway, and for the problem, not the problem, but there's problem, those drafts come along once every 10 years, though,
Yeah.
where, you get a player like that, and maybe did not be one for the next 4 or 5 years. But I think,
Right.
they're going to try to make the playoffs, try to get to six, get their way out of the play-in. And, I think they're building toward that. But to me, the big summer is 26, not this summer.
Okay. Well, as Sam, as always, I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to talk with me about this team. It means a great deal to me and to my viewers. Keep up the great work and best of luck to everything in this upcoming offseason and going into this upcoming season.
All right, no more. Don't you bring up Giannis again.
I will not bring up Giannis again, I promise.
All right,
Take care,
thanks.
Sam.